My name is Nicola, and you're watching Singularity FM, the place where we interview the future. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please show your support by leaving a review on iTunes or becoming a patron via interviewthefuture.com. My guest today is Dr. Jad Tarifi, CEO and co-founder of Integral AI. Jad is developing scalable, energy-efficient AGI to bring humanity closer to superintelligence. Before founding Integral AI, he spent nearly a decade at Google AI, where he created and led the world's first generative AI team. Jad holds a PhD in AI and Master of Science in Quantum Computing, and is the author of the highly acclaimed Freedom series, which is a 4-volume exploration of AGI, human potential, and flourishing in a world shaped by superintelligence. This is my second conversation with Jad, and if you haven't watched our first interview, I strongly recommend you start there, as it provides most of the personal, professional, and theoretical context for the content Jad and I will discuss today. So, welcome to Singularity FM again, Jad.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while.
Fantastic. It's been roughly about a year, and a lot of things did happen in that past year. Some didn't happen. So I want us to jump right into the deep end, because I know you're busy. You have another appointment you have to commute for after this. So I want us to jump right into the deep end with a quote from you from our previous interview. This is the quote. Last time you said, quote, "Current transformer models like ChatGPT, even with the addition of reasoning like O1, do not satisfy the criteria for AGI. Stay tuned for an announcement very soon from our company." Did I miss your announcement?
The announcement is actually happening next Monday. So we finally are ready for that announcement. It took a while for us to get it confirmed and iterate on that. Yes.
That's fantastic. So it's Tuesday where I am in Toronto, and it's actually Wednesday morning where you are in Tokyo, Japan, I understand.
Yep.
So about 4 days from now, you're about to make an announcement. So we have one of two options right now to strategize. Usually it takes me 3 or 4 days to edit this. So we can just proceed, and you can consider this as part of your announcement, and I will publish the interview on Monday morning. Or we can proceed as we are ahead of time, and then I'll publish the interview probably a couple of days before the announcement. How do you like to proceed?
No, let's assume the first option. I think it's
the first option. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to have, in that case, and thank you for your generosity for that, a fully open conversation. And we would consider that today we are fast forwarded in time, and we are 4 days, that is to say, on next Monday, which is what, December 8th, 2025. Yes. Mm-hmm. So would that day leave any mark in our future, in the calendar of our civilization?
Well, every day leaves a mark. The question is, the question is this the time where people will notice? Well, I hope so, but I can't guarantee it, right? You could be right, but a bit early. So we're going to be announcing some breakthroughs that I think enables AGI. The date that most people will remember will be the date where most people recognize this, as opposed to where it's first announced. So let's see. Mm-hmm. It's an open question.
Okay, so you basically right now subverted my entire interview plan. So let's go free flow from here on, because we are ahead of time on that Monday. What are the details? Give me the meat of the matter. What's the breakthrough? What's the big thing that we have waited for a whole year since our previous conversation in December of 2024?
Yeah. Well, the current paradigm in LLMs, it's all about scaling both pre-training and post-training. But that means that those models require a lot of compute in order for you to have them be deployed and acquire skills, right? What we need is to move to a world where the focus is not on tests, like have you achieved this particular score on a test, regardless of how much resources that you've put, to a paradigm where we optimize for learning itself. So it's how much can you learn new skills efficiently and reliably. So that means models that can continually learn on the job. And not only that, but maybe even create their own training data and feed it back to itself. And creating your own training data could be done by taking action in the physical world, by asking the right question with surgical efficiency, just like you do as a podcast host. You're good at probing questions. So we need models that can do that, that can interact with the environment and learn through interaction. So that's what we call interactive learning. It's a new paradigm of learning that lets models learn on the job while they interact with the world.
And let's not forget there's one other condition. It needs to consume equal or less to the learning equivalence of a human.
Yes. And continual learning is part of the secret for that, right? Because in current models, you have to retrain the whole thing from scratch, or you have to fine tune, and then you forgot a lot of the knowledge that you had beforehand. So continual learning is essential for this energy efficiency, but also the architecture itself has to be rethought to be an abstraction-first world model as opposed to a prediction-only world model.
So are you telling me that you have an architecture which is able to continuously learn either from experience or from taking action, that's to say, or from surgically precise questions like the ones I ask usually in my interviews, and all at the cost of a dinner worth of energy, just like me before this interview?
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. So we're dividing the breakthrough into three subcomponents. One is an architectural breakthrough to move from prediction-only models to abstraction and prediction models. So models that both explicitly abstract the world and then predict it, as opposed to purely predict it. And we can talk about why that's important and dig into why there are actually many scientists trying to do that as well. But we think we have the right approach to do that. That's an architectural breakthrough. And then there's a learning method breakthrough, which is going beyond current methods, which can be classified as imitation learning or reinforcement learning. So the new learning paradigm is interactive learning that enables both efficient planning to surgically take action. And that action could be a physical action or could be a question. And then feeding it back to the model and applying a breakthrough in continual learning so that the model can improve itself. So we've reached interactive learning allows model to self-improve. And the third breakthrough is a breakthrough in alignment. And this is basically how to make sure these models operate safely in the world. So when they are doing these surgical actions, they don't cause unintended consequences. and make sure that there's safety as they scale.
Wow, this is mind-boggling. So, and just to wrap up, all of those three breakthroughs are because you last time when we had our conversation, you were the first interviewee ever that put very ambitious and hard requirement on AGI to consume energy equal or less to that of a human, right? So, which is very ambitious, and it's gargantuan difference in efficiency between what we're watching right now as the ongoing scaling laws are costing us, not just hundreds of billions, but trillions of dollars, to continue the scaling process. So, are you saying that you accomplished these three things at an energy cost equivalence of a human?
Yes, so to be precise, what we will reveal is what we call an AGI capable model, because AGI itself is a property of a model and its learning method. It's not the end system. The end system is when you scale that up through interaction with the environment, through experience. And we believe that this is the right model to scale to superintelligence. I think it's not surprising because once you have the right architecture that mirrors how the neocortex works, we should be able to implement it a lot more efficiently because we don't need to use the very inefficient chemical process of eating, of body maintenance. And so there's no reason a priori to think that once we have the right algorithms, we're going to be more expensive. So to me, it's a very natural expectation to have had in advance. And now we believe that these models have the right energy profile, that they're ready for prime time, they're ready to scale, and we're going to be able to see them achieve the superintelligence capability.
Wow. Okay, so as I said, you subverted my entire pre-planned flow for our interview. So let's take it step by step here and go, with the flow. By the way, for those who haven't seen the first interview yet, and I say again, guys, go and watch that interview because it was one of the most epic interviews I've ever done out of 320, 30 with all kinds of amazing people. But it was just epic. That's the word. It was epic, and we have a big frame to fill today, and I hope we would succeed. But we're starting strong already. So let's break it down into those three components and talk about the specific details of your announcement. So the first one was architecture, from prediction to abstraction. Tell us more about how this is different than the current GPT style models, because someone would say, well, they have some kind of prediction and they surely have maybe a little bit of abstraction, not fully blown, but to a certain degree, some abstraction of a cat, of a dog, when you ask it to identify an image or something like that. So that means they do abstract at least a little bit. How is your architecture different than that?
Great question. So there is actually a spectrum between memorization and abstraction. And on that spectrum, LLMs are not pure memorization machines. If they were, they wouldn't be able to adapt to anything, right? They just spit out their training data. LLMs do abstract, but their mechanism of abstraction is weak. And to understand that, I'm going to give you a very simple analogy that many people can relate to probably. There's a lot of students that study a lot before the exam, last minute, and they go to the exam, maybe they do okay on the test, and then a few weeks later, they completely forget the material, right? So this type of cram studying, where your target is only to succeed on the test or succeed on the prediction, this is the type of training that LLMs do, right? So for that student, they're not really sure they understand it or they just memorized it. And there is some understanding there, but it's quite vague, right? Whereas if you go to the other end of the spectrum, where you focus on abstraction, what you're trying to do is compress the data deeply. So this is the other student that been thinking about the problem and maybe thinks about it in the shower, maybe dreams about the problem. And then if you talk to them, you can see that they've compressed the problem. They can talk about it very elegantly using very few words, but profoundly cut through to the fundamental essence of the problem. That is compression. And that type of student doesn't need to memorize anything, because 10 years later, you might ask them and then they will re-derive the whole thing from scratch, right? So we cannot blame LLMs, because we're asking them to memorize. We're asking them to just pass the exam. We're not asking them to compress. We're not asking them to explicitly compress. So our model is genuinely requested to compress and predict the same time.
Wow. And by the way, you reminded me with your example of my time at university, where one of the things that really used to drive me nuts is like when some of my colleagues or even friends would go and ask the professor, will this be on the test? And I'll be like, oh, this is driving me nuts. Like, who cares what's on the test? Are you here to pass tests or are you here to gain knowledge? Like, I don't care about the test, you know? I just want to gain knowledge. I want to be better. I want to improve myself. Sometimes that would come at the expense of me not paying too close attention to what's at the test. But I believe overall that really helped me to be a better person afterwards. Maybe not as best a student, even though I did quite well, but you know, some of my colleagues actually tried to do the opposite. They focused on being as best students in the test taking capacity of a student and not as much student in terms of the learning process and improving themselves. And that used to drive me nuts when I was a student.
Yes, a lot of us can relate to this, because we've all went to school and we've all meet these people. Maybe some of us were these people. And so that's why I like this example, because it clearly makes you feel the difference viscerally.
Okay, so that's kind of the architecture. What about the learning model? Where is your breakthrough about the learning model? Because ChatGPT also learns. I give it all kinds of parameters. I put all kinds of documents in it. I say, look at this, my previous keynote speech. Look at my new keynote speech. Now tell me where are the greatest flaws in my speech and what would be the strongest possible arguments against what I'm arguing here. And it's able to learn and kind of recall what I've done and even come up with an argument against me, which in the end, I believe makes me stronger and better. So when I go and present, I'm not shocked about, making some ridiculous, unsubstantiated claims. And I actually like to use it very often in adversarial kind of a function as it arguing or playing against me, because even if I lose the interactions, those several interaction rounds, in the end of the process, I believe I come through better because I learn. So tell me, what's the difference between your model and ChatGPT?
Okay. So traditional neural networks, including LLMs, when you teach them a new skill, and they don't try to revise the past, they end up forgetting the past. So, for example, you teach them how to clean the kitchen table, they forget that what they've learned how to cook, right? So you teach them a skill, they forget the previous one. This is the problem called catastrophic forgetting, interference in learning. And they do learn, and to understand it a bit more deeply, we have to think about the different types of memories in a model. So roughly you can think that there's 3 levels of memories. There's the memory at the bottom level, it's encoded in the model weights. So this is the thing you train. Then there's the memory at the highest level, which is the context window. So this is your working memory. Right? Now, what's amazing about large language models is that they can have very large context windows, larger than a human. Right? So that's why they can appear to be learning on the job through in-context learning. So when you give it the models, they can put it all in its working memory and then produce really amazing analysis as a result. Very impressive. There's also a middle level of memory, which goes by the name of RAG, which is basically retrieval augmented generation. So they're able to access tools that they can read and write to, right, to help assist them, right, in that generation process. And then what happens is that they read, write to short-term memory, context memory, and then generate. This all works very well for a lot of applications, but not if you want to learn on the job. If you want to learn on the job, you must be able to bring new information that you've put in your context window back to the weights, back to the lowest level, the foundational level, and do so without forgetting important things from the past. So if you learn how to clean the kitchen, you shouldn't be forgetting how to cook, right? Otherwise, you're never going to, you have a game of guacamole. You're never going to be able to grow your knowledge over time. So to address this, we had to solve 2 very interesting complementary challenges and tie them together in a very nice way. The first is continual learning. Continual learning is how to, when I give the model new data, how can I choose which memories in the past that it has to remember so it reconciles them together without forgetting. The solution to that turns out to look very similar to dreaming. So it turns out that the model has to dream up new data that it thinks is critically useful to remember, in contrast to existing data that it's being learned. So this process that's very similar to dreaming, we've shown experimentally over many different data sets that it's able to achieve continual learning. That's already a fantastic breakthrough that many people consider central to AGI. The second complementary breakthrough is related to planning. So can you plan efficiently at multiple levels of abstraction? The reason you want to plan efficiently is that ultimately you want the model to autonomously self-improve. So for it to be able to take action and generate its own training data, it has to plan the future, realize what it doesn't know, and what's surgically important to go and fetch from the world. So the model uses planning in order to know what it doesn't know and what it needs to know, and then uses action to collect the training data, the additional training data, and use continual learning to continuously improve itself. Putting all these steps together is what you call interactive learning. It enables learning on the job.
Wow, so that's kind of like a recursive circle, or a positive reinforcement circle where the output becomes the new input, and then you go further and further. By the way, when you were talking about catastrophic forgetting, I was reminded of 15 years ago, it happened to me like all the time. It still happens to me all the time. 15 years ago, me and my wife had different phones. So I had an iPhone and she had a BlackBerry. And every time she had a problem with her BlackBerry, I basically had to, because I wasn't a BlackBerry user and she couldn't fix it herself. I had to learn it from the beginning to figure out what's the problem. Then I had to figure out what's the solution and fix it for her. And then 3 or 4, 5 months later, she would have another problem. And I'll take her BlackBerry again. And because I haven't used it in 5 or 6 months, I've forgotten everything. So I have to start again from the very zero beginning, learn everything again, figure out what's the problem and how to fix it. And after doing that for a couple of years, I was like, you know what, honey? We're getting identical phones. From now on, BlackBerry is over and we're going to an iPhone because I don't have the capacity to keep learning all the time your own system, and we need to be in sync so that I don't have to start from ground zero. So I have that kind of catastrophic forgetting, and that's just one example of catastrophic forgetting for me.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a useful type of forgetting in the sense that if you don't really need the data or you're not expected to use it, you don't need to remember the detail, but maybe you're going to remember higher level strategies. For example, how did you actually end up acquiring the data? So the brain has to be very efficient in prioritizing what to remember and what to forget. The problem with neural networks is right now, you don't have a handle of that. Like literally, they forget important things when you're trying to fine tune them. So we need a way for the model to reason about what it needs to remember and explicitly try to remember the things that it thinks is important to know.
Now, let's look at these two things, the dreaming and the planning and action, which becomes a kind of reinforcement, self-learning loop kind of. Let's take the learning part first. How is that different from AlphaZero? Because someone would say AlphaZero learned to play Go by playing against its own self. So in a way, it learned and taught itself to learn on its own, right? I think my understanding was that they basically had two instantiations of AlphaZero playing against each other, but I may have that completely wrong. Anyway, it was playing against each other, and it played obviously, I don't know, 1 billion games or 1 trillion games. I have no idea what's the data set there, but eventually it learned how to play Go and came up with totally what some people called innovative strategies, like the famous move 37 against Lee Sedol. So how is your type of planning and action kind of, which then goes into the planning again after the action is taken and learning loop, differ from Alpha? Maybe it was called AlphaZero. Did I say AlphaGo or AlphaZero? I think it was called AlphaZero.
The one that learns from scratch is called AlphaZero.
Yeah,
and this is a great question. So that method uses reinforcement learning. And the good thing about the domain that they were working in is that they were working in simulation. So they didn't need to worry about what actions they take. There's no actions that cause catastrophic failure, right? And because they're working in a simulation and a very simple problem, efficiency doesn't matter that much. So the main difference between us and RL, you can come down to 3 fundamental differences. So at the most basic and kind of important is that RL is like learning by taking random or weakly guided actions in the world. So imagine you learn how to drive a car by randomly driving it and crashing
by crashing into everything you see for the first like 500 million tries.
Exactly. So that's not going to cut it in the world. So I want a model that I can ask it, hey, learn how to cook, but please don't burn the kitchen while you're doing so, right? So this is a very important, the reliability and safety aspect. The second is the efficiency. So how much effort is the model putting into learning? So there's 2 types of efficiency. There is the efficiency in terms of compute, which is related to planning. And then the efficiency in terms of how much physical action it needs to take to collect the data. So And the total efficiency, physical action costs energy, compute costs energy. The total is the energy cost. For these models are enormous because they don't plan intelligently, right? And they need to take a lot of action. So they're very sample inefficient. That's the technical term. So our models are a lot more sample efficient and they plan efficiently as well. So you end up.
Can you give me just some sense of the order of magnitude or the difference of energy between your model and their model? Is it like a factor of 10, 100, a million? I have no idea.
So there's something in computer science that we call the O notation. So something is not a constant factor more efficient, it's fundamentally more efficient, which means that it gets more efficient the more you scale it. So these models have completely different scaling properties. So it actually, if you take a small model, it might be 10 times more efficient. But if you take a very, very large model, it might be 1,000,000 times more efficient. So the efficiency actually grows the more you scale up the model. It's not linear in that sense.
Wow.
So that's the efficiency there. They're fundamentally more efficient, both in terms of the planning side and the taking action, the sampling side. So this is the second. So reliability, efficiency, and the third is open-endedness. So with reinforcement learning, you really have to give it a new goal explicitly every time, right? You have to say, hey, focus on doing this one task, and it's going to spend a lot of energy, break the world multiple times over, and then it's going to learn this one task. But with these models, they're going to constantly building up on the past and building a stack or a hierarchy of skills over time, which means that's a combination of continual learning and hierarchical learning, which means they just constantly get better at everything, right? And then you can even give them a very high level goal, like maximize freedom, and then watch them kind of be open-ended independent agents. So the open-endedness, which means you don't have to focus on one goal only, but have the model generally grow in a universal set of skills. That's the fundamental difference that feeds back to everything, right? It makes the model a lot more efficient, it makes the model a lot more useful, and because there's a lot of transfer across skills, it makes the model a lot more reliable as well.
Wow. And now, when we were talking about AlphaZero, we were talking about a closed logical virtual or simulated system. It seems to me you're talking about an open real world system, if I get this right. In other words, the applicability, because the problem with many of these other models, it seems to me as a non-expert or an observer, is that they're really good at like closed systems like chess, like Go, and stuff like that. The real world, however, is messy. It's complicated. It's not closed. It's kind of unpredictable. There's lots of inputs that you cannot predict or account for at the beginning that you didn't expect. There's surprises happening all the time. There's leakages, there's entropy, there's all kinds of interference, right? So what you're saying, if I get this right, is that's the difference between your model and their model. Their models kind of, it seems to me, excel at those closed systems. Now they're ambitious and they want to bring them everywhere into the open world. But you're saying you've already kind of accomplished that at a much lower energy level, which scales and in a way that proportionately even diminishes the cost even further as it scales up.
Yes. And last year, when we talked a little bit about that, it was probably considered a controversial view because last year everybody was focused on the hype. But now, fast forward 1 year, it's starting to become obvious for the top leaders in various labs. So, for example, the head of DeepMind, Google DeepMind, has explicitly said recently that he's primarily focused on world models and
Demis
how,
Hassabis?
yes, and how to solve problems like continual learning. Right, so it's very clear that we've shifted to this. So this is from Google, and then from OpenAI, their ex-chief scientist Ilya Sutskever recently also gave an interview, and he was saying precisely the same thing. We need to focus on learning itself and solve things like continual learning, right? And then, of course, Yann LeCun, which recently left or is leaving Meta, has been saying the same thing about world models. So maybe last year it would have been considered a controversial opinion. Now I would say it's closer to the consensus opinion that this is what we need to do. The difference is that's been our opinion, my opinion, my co-founder's opinion for the last, at least on my part, 20 years, and that this is what we need to do. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's what you meant when you said last time that you now have the ingredients for AGI. You were kind of referring to continuous learning.
I was referring to actually all of these three breakthroughs that I mentioned. So
The
interactive
abstraction,
learning.
the learning, and the alignment.
Yes, and within learning, we had already results on continuous learning. We also had results on efficient planning last year. But putting it all together and making sure it works, and being able to convince ourselves as scientists that there's no hidden assumptions that we're making takes a very long time. And I wonder, in retrospect, it's hard to tell, but I wonder if it's better to think a lot more and perfect something before announcing it, or is it better to announce things on the fly? I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer there, but for better or worse, we spend a lot of time trying to really convince ourselves before coming out with something so, I would say, a bold statement like we think we figured it out.
Wow. And I mean, you would find proponents in different situations for both strategies. I am remembering vaguely a story, I think, about Thomas Edison. And I'm not sure if it was about the light bulb or something else, that he actually made the announcement way before they were ready. And his whole team kind of was freaking out, and he was like, great, now we have to do it because we already told the world that we've done it. So that's one strategy. Now we can argue how appropriate or smart or intelligent that kind of strategy is when we're talking about AI or AGI especially and stuff like that. I would say I would be more leaning towards being cautious and erring on the safety side before you figure out, alignment and all those things, which we're going to talk in a second. But let me ask you this, though, because the scaling efficiency seems to be also exhibited to some degree in the current LLM models. And what I mean by that is the following. The cost per token currently, I forget the exact number, but I think it has diminished, you correct me here, maybe by a factor of million over the last 2 years. Like the cost of token has plummeted. And now the scaling models and the training and all of that is growing exponentially. The investment that companies are putting is now spanning trillions of dollars. But the actual usage efficiency per token, at least, is diminishing. And now, of course, the demand is exploding too. So it's actually outpacing probably the efficiency gained per token of energy. So in other words, we are demanding a lot more tokens to be consumed faster than the energy efficiency is increasing of those or plummeting. And so the overall bottom line is that our energy demand is still growing despite the fact that the energy consumption per token consumed is diminishing. Does this make sense to you? And how, if so, how is it different than what you have discovered or are launching?
This is all correct, and I expect this trend to continue. So there's a big gap, and we're going to continuously improve that part. But even though everything you said is correct, it's focused on inference. The thing we care about is the learning process itself. So the learning process has to be more efficient. That is the key here. LLMs, by the way, can achieve anything, right? So LLMs, especially if you put them in a loop, approximate a Turing machine, are Turing complete, which means they can brute force anything. So given enough energy and data, you can brute force your way to learn any problem. They can compute anything, so of course you can do it. That's not interesting. The question is how much you can learn anything efficiently and reliably, like without brute forcing it. And once you've learned it, then the inference part is all about, optimizing the engine to run fast. And I expect that to continue to improving, not only at the software layer, but also at the hardware acceleration front.
Yeah. Okay, so that's about the learning part, but tell me a little bit about the difference and you kind of touched a little about it, about the action part, because to the ignorant like me, we have some kind of agentic capabilities out there already. So for example, if I want to buy a plane ticket and if I want to tell, Perplexity or something like that, using their Comet browser or something, buy me a plane ticket or buy me a this and that, and I have my credit card inputted and all of this, it could find a plane ticket and buy one for me now, allegedly. Now, I haven't done it because I honestly haven't been wanting to give it my credit card and take a chance on like getting an expensive ticket I don't need, but allegedly it can do that already. So in some ways, if that's true, there's already some kind of action being taken. Is that correct in your opinion? And how is it different than what you're accomplishing and doing?
Absolutely correct. But it's, again, the same answer. I hope I don't bore you to death.
Oh, no.
So the difference is that our models is taking action while it's learning, not only in inference time. So it's taking action in order to teach itself, like an experimental scientist. So it comes up with a hypothesis about the world, takes action, sees the result, improve its world understanding, and then can come up with a new hypothesis and so on. So you can ask this model, hey, go invent a room temperature semiconducting material. And it should, understand all the literature out there, make some experiments in a lab, get the results, improve the literature, and then keep iterating in a closed loop until it invents that. You can ask it, hey, go cure this type of cancer, right? And then it's going to have to do what it takes. And as a scientist, we don't take random action, I hope, right? We try to be very thoughtful and plan ahead and strategically decide what are the most efficient way we can experiment in the world to update our scientific theory, or what we call a world model. And the scientific method is all about iterating on that in a loop, right? So this is interactive learning. So the interactive learning is both the method of science, experimental science, but also the method by which babies learn how to navigate the world. So.
Wow, so it's kind of slowly starting to click in. So forgive my poor questions, because like I'm trying to figure this out just like your model as we're going, and I'm not even a scientist really. But so okay, what's the kind of resource limitation on your model? Because you gave two examples, like whether creating a superconductor at room temperature where curing cancer, you can task or prompt your AI with that kind of thing. It would start the loop of, planning, learning, taking action, creating a hypothesis, then doing the whole loop again and improving. But there has to be some kind of resource limit, whether in terms of time, in terms of constraint, or in terms of resources of data or energy consumed within which it's supposed to resolve that task. Because maybe it would end up like the supercomputer from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they asked this super brilliant, smartest machine that was ever designed, what's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And it took 5 or 6 million years before it was able to compute, because it went into this loop. And obviously in the book, they were able to go and, get the answer after 5 or 6 million years or however millions of years it took. But we don't have that luxury in our reality here today. So there has to be some kind of limitation. What are your limitations or your model's limitations within which it's operating?
This is a great question. So it touches upon the difference between skill learning and open-endedness.
Right.
And the way you give the model these limitations is by defining the skill properly. So if I say, hey, I want you to learn how to cook a meal, but I don't want it to cost more than, say, $100, right? And I'm hungry, so I need something within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? So these are the constraints that you give it as part of the definition of the skill you want it to learn.
Right.
But here's the powerful inversion. Once you've achieved that skill-specific learning capability, you can define a skill that is so open-ended that you can get the other side for free. So you can say, hey, instead of cook me a meal under $100 in 10 minutes, I want you to do the best possible, the greatest possible skill ever, which is maximize the collective agency of the world or maximize freedom for the world. And just go ahead and do that. So that gives you a recipe for open-endedness, for the model to kind of literally be like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it goes on and on and on forever. In a sense, being autonomous agent, right? So basically the skill can be as small as a meal or smaller, or as large as, maximize flourishing for humanity, or even maximize flourishing for the universe, which is, even bigger than that.
And now enlighten me, because I don't understand this. How do you scale from cooking me dinner to giving me the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? After mastering the first one, getting the second one for free. I'm just confused. How do you go from one to the other?
So we're not talking about the ability to cook dinner and then the ability to maximize the flourishing. We're talking about the ability to learn that ability.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Once you have the ability to learn that ability, then it's straightforward. It's just about defining what you need to learn. But the learning process itself has to go through steps, right? So if I tell the super intelligence, hey, maximize flourishing, it might start by saying, well, first I have to, feed you because you look hungry, and if you're starving, there's no flourishing in the world. So it might actually start small and kind of build up over time.
Wow. Then I have to house you. Then I have to make sure you're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have to make sure you're not stressed or whatever. Okay, there's a million questions. You're literally blowing up my mind here. So, and time is advancing, which is the severe constraints I'm operating under today. So my CPU is literally here consuming all kinds of resources at scales previously unimaginable. So let's talk a little bit more about the dreaming, because I didn't quite get that part right. Why is dreaming so vital or crucial and so kind of a breakthrough for what we're trying to accomplish here with respect to learning? I mean, the only thing that that comes to my mind when you tell me about dreaming is that I know that Mendeleev came up with the table of elements during a dream as he was asleep. It's a famous story. I don't know if it's exactly true, but I've heard it multiple times that's how that happened. So he was dreaming and he figured out the table of elements. So but that's the closest my poor mind can get to. Why is this dreaming so important for learning?
Great. So I'm sure you've had that experience before where you slept, had a good night's sleep, and suddenly things come together very clearly. It's a consistent thing. So what happens? So the theory of dreaming is very controversial. Now, there's no scientific consensus at the moment. Um, a lot of people say it's just random noise, which to me is ridiculous, right? Like, we're so natural selection is so brutal. Like,
Yeah,
I wouldn't
yeah.
waste 8 hours a day, half of that on random noise, right? So what actually happens in our view is dreaming is when memory syndication happens. So it's when you reconcile the data you learned in the day in your memory buffer of the day with your long-term memory. And when you do that reconciliation, that's when you encode those memories in higher level concepts. So this is when you compress those memories. And because you've compressed them, you finally understand them. You finally have figured out the underlying principles behind those memories. Otherwise, they will stay fragmented. So this dreaming
Wow.
process enables memory syndication, which is key for continual learning.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was in high school, I was lucky enough to be accepted in the best high school in Bulgaria when I was 14. And first year is a lost year. It's called a preparatory year because after grade 7, you don't go into grade 8, but you go into preparatory year. And the reason for that is that you start studying English at a very intensive level. So everything that you study, chemistry, biology, literature, you name it, history, physical education, even everything is in English. And the idea is that, and you sleep and you live there in that high school, at least at the time, that's how the system was. We had a boarding school, so you couldn't even leave. And you even had to like ask for your food in English and all of that stuff. And the idea was that at some point, sooner or later, if you start dreaming in English, that means you're making progress. You're kind of internalizing and absorbing that and kind of learning, picking up the language. Because up until then, I didn't really know a word of English, to be honest with you. And so in the first year, I remember towards the second term at some point, I literally started dreaming in English. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm starting to learn. I'm starting to pick up the language now because I'm actually literally dreaming in English, which was weird to me because it never happened before that.
Yes, the world of dreaming is fascinating. I've had similar experiences where I solve problems in my dreams. And if you're interested in that, I would recommend exploring something called dream yoga. So there's a ancient tradition from Tibet and India about
Wow.
being able to kind of become lucid in your dreams. But not this is not just typical lucid dreaming. It's about actually bringing meditative insight in the dream state, um, and using that for self-inquiry and growth. Um, Lots of good books. Yeah, dream
Wow.
yoga, fun, but
Dream yoga.
exhausting. if you practice StreamYard, you'll need 10 hours of sleep and you will now feel refreshed because you're working, right?
You're working, you're processing hard.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, fascinating. All right. So we talked about the architecture, we talked about the interactive learning model.
Mm-hmm.
Now about the alignment. I mean, this is kind of also a big claim to say the least. I mean, there are all kinds of people which are saying alignment is impossible. Let's define it first of all. What do we mean by alignment here? How do you define alignment? That's the first question. And the second is, once we define it, how did you accomplish it?
Right. Defining it in of itself is maybe the most important part of accomplishing it, because we live in a postmodern world right now,
Yes.
where we somehow lost our sense of what right or wrong is. There's a lot of debate. Oh, is truth subjective? Is morality subjective? Um, and that's understandable because a lot of bad things happened in the world due to moral blindness, where some group of people felt they're morally superior because they know the right way and they try to impose it on others. That led to world wars and so on. And maybe we still have some of that. And so there's a natural reaction to reject this outright. There's no absolute morality. It's all super subjective. And in that framework, I think alignment is impossible because there's no objectivity to it. It's pure subjectivity. So it's going to be inherently dependent on potentially conflicting ideals, right? So part of solving alignment is about understanding what the goal is, right? And to do that, we have to go to the most basic first principles about what is life, what is intelligence, why are we here, in order to derive a moral principle that's sufficiently potent and sufficiently general that can apply to any individual or any life form, but sufficiently open-ended that allows for differences. So what the good life means for you and what the good life means for me could be very different. But we need to find what is the underlying commonality there. And so the definition for alignment, to me, is about maximizing the collective agency, or what I call freedom, for the part and the whole. And if you properly define it, they're equivalent. So maximizing freedom for the part and freedom for the whole are one and the same. That is the hard part, right? That you come up with an objective way of defining what alignment is. Now, how to actually do that in practice, what you need is that ability for these models to do efficient planning, because they can then simulate the future and preemptively weigh in and reason about the consequences of their actions and consider how these actions can affect your agency and the collective agency of the world. And they will choose the actions that are going to improve your agency, not diminish it. And by doing so, fundamentally, they have to ask you questions about what you need or observe you to figure out what you need. So they become compassionate by definition, because they
Wow.
have to observe you and know where you are so they can help you maximize your agency. So these models have a shared meta goal, which is maximize freedom or collective agency, but also fill in the details that is different for every person and every context.
Wow. And while ensuring that it doesn't impact or interfere with other people's maximized freedom context. And that multiplied by, 7 billion at least and growing. Okay, so many questions. Let me define something else here, which is a kind of a contested word. What is freedom?
Yes. So this is a good time to actually go back
And how do you measure it? Because if you're maximizing something,
Mhm.
you have to be able to define it, but also you have to be able to estimate the level or measure it, and then assess whether it's going up or down relative to where it was before.
Yes. So those are very interesting questions. By the way, we recently submitted the paper. I think it was accepted on a minor version of this, not the full version. But I can explain. So for context, by the way, for listeners, we talked a bit about that in our first episode.
We touched on it.
Yes, touched on it, not deeply enough. So the way we define freedom is through the agency cycle. So if you think about what agency means, it's about an agent must, in order to operate in the world, must perceive the world, must make decisions, plan about what it wants, make decisions about what it wants, and then take action in the world, and then renew itself, so maintain itself. So an agent must maximize knowledge, benevolence, power, and vitality, right? So this is the agency cycle that we need to maximize. The problem is you don't know how to maximize it because it's completely uncomputable, right? But what you can do is approximate it. And the way you approximate it is using a very interesting trick at the heart of the P versus NP problem. And the interesting trick is that it's easier to evaluate two things, whether one thing is better than the other, than actually generate an answer. So that what we do is that we have the model think through various scenarios and decide, well, this scenario is likely to be better for you than this other scenario from that sense of agency. And this scenario is roughly similar to this scenario. So we're not going to gain information from there. So we have the model keep thinking about these various scenarios, think about them as moral dilemmas, right? And then trying to unambiguously tell. Sometimes it's very easy answer. Sometimes the answer is unknown, and that's fine, right? It just flags it as such. And it keeps doing that. And hopefully, with enough scale, you can get superhuman moral decision-making capability. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have superhuman moral decision-making capability with this approach, where the alignment is generated dynamically through thinking about potential futures and evaluating them relative to each other. The key thing here is evaluation is easier than generation. But you can bootstrap generation by generating random things or intelligently planning various generations and then comparing them and feeding that back to the generation process. Right? So this is a way to scale this up. Right?
Okay, but can you please forgive me? And I have a follow-up question, but did I miss the definition of freedom? So
Yes,
you said it contains these four things, like the ability to perceive, to plan, to act, and to maintain. Mm-hmm. And in the previous conversation, you said that they need to be infinite ultimately. That's the goal. Like, so infinite perception, infinite ability to plan, infinite ability to act, and infinite ability to maintain. So I get that, and we call that kind of godhood even. Mm-hmm. But how do we define freedom? Did you say it and I missed it? I apologize.
So capital F freedom is that exact thing. And short F freedom is basically the gradient towards that. Right? So anything that improves your capacity to know, do, plan, and take action and renew yourself increases your freedom.
Okay, so this is very interesting that you say it, because the previous interview that I just published a couple of days ago is with a journalist called Jacob Ward. I think currently he works for NBC, but he's worked for PBS. He was the editor of, I think, Popular Science, and he's worked at Al Jazeera, and he's a fantastic journalist. And he wrote this book called The Loop. And I share a lot of his fears and concerns. And basically, he goes through the neuroscience of this loop of thinking and how what seem to be apparent decisions for us are very often manipulatable and manipulated by a number of external factors which we are unaware of and we do not control. And how currently there is all these kind of biohacking experts, and some of them even call their companies like Dopamine or something like that, whose explicit goal, and they're experts for hire, is to help other people and AI hijack your capacity for independent choice and make the choice for you. Basically, to addict you to their tech, whatever their tech may be, just like a gambler is addicted, just like an alcoholic is addicted. And his argument, Jacob Ward's argument, is that, AI is telling us now what, and by the way, that's an argument I made for the first time in around 2018, 2019 at the conference where I was invited to speak, called Dark Futures. And I was trying to come up with a more dark future kind of scenario and put that forward, and I called it neo-technocracy. And I said it's basically what we're observing already, which is AI is telling us what to read, what to watch, what to eat, whom to date, where to study, where to work, where to go for vacation, who should be our friends, and eventually it will tell us even who to vote for and stuff like that. And so it seems that step by step, it is kind of telling us that it's giving us more freedom, but on the other hand, it's undermining our ability to make a free, independent choice. And so ultimately, it may end up undermining our ability to self-determine. And let me give you the kind of intellectual roots of this with a quote. And, he was a famous professor in mathematics. So, and he was looking at the meta scale, or at the larger scale, whereas my examples were kind of at the individual scale. So here's the quote from him. As society and the problems that face it become more and more complex and machines become more and more intelligent, people will let machines make more of their decisions for them. Eventually, a stage may be reached at which the decisions necessary to keep the system running will be so complex that human beings will be incapable of making them intelligently. Now, for those of us here, and I'm sure you may have already figured it out, that was Ted Kaczynski, who wrote that in his manifesto in the late 90s after his kind of bombing campaign. But basically, he's saying the same thing. He's saying that the machines are one step at a time taking away our ability to choose. And I would say that freedom contains the inalienable ability to make a free choice of self-determination. Whereas it would appear that if we let AI tell us whom to date, where to study, where to work, etc., the things I mentioned, actually we would not be making any choices, but we are simply surrendering all of those choices and ultimately do that long enough, even the capacity to make those choices to the AI. And therefore, that may not turn out to be the path towards freedom, but the opposite. Now, where is this reasoning kind of flawed?
Okay, thank you. I think it's we have to be careful to not mix the systems that exist now with destiny, right? So the current systems are explicitly designed to exploit you. So they're literally trained. It's not the AI's fault. It's the fault of the designers of these systems that
Sure.
they're actually asking them to maximize your engagement. If
Sure.
you're training to maximize the engagement, the AI will maximize the engagement. And that could mean showing you more racy material, more violent material, more controversial material to keep you on edge, to keep you uncomfortable, to keep you coming back for more, to spike your dopamine neurons, which is not pleasurable. You know, dopamine is so unpleasurable that you know you don't like it, yet you still come back for more. This is exactly that process. And these models
You're
are
hooked.
Yes, and not in a good way, right? So these models are explicitly designed to do so. So what I'm proposing is our models are explicitly designed to maximize your free choice. So let's not mistake a design decision by engineers and designers and companies with profit motives for something that as a civilization we can fundamentally choose differently. We can design it differently. In our definition of freedom, the AI maximizes your free choice in the sense that it simplifies the world for you so that you can make even better choices. Right? Presents you with genuine points where your life can bifurcate. Right? Do you want to do this or that? And these are the raw, genuine decisions that you ought to make with your body. A good AI optimizes for that as opposed to try to hijack you as a consumer. And by the way, this is a reflection of the capitalist economy we live in, right? So the capitalist economy reduces individuals to rational economic agents that must be hacked, whether through labor, you need to work to survive, right? Or as consumers. So it really alienates our humanity. And that's why what I propose is a post-capitalist system, which we call the alignment economy, which is specifically aimed at maximizing freedom as a fundamental objective. And I think we touched upon it lightly last time, where even prices.
Let's go a little bit deeper into that. What is the alignment economy? I think we just barely mentioned it last time. That's as far as we went.
So most people think when we have superintelligence, everything is solved. That's not true. When we have superintelligence, we will still have fundamental constraints, namely energy. And actually, it comes down to time. You mentioned time. Time is the most fundamental unit in physics, and everything comes down to time. So we'll still have those fundamental constraints: time, which expresses itself as energy, as space, as matter. And so we still have to make these choices about how to spend our time, our energy, our life. And so we still need a way to allocate resources among potentially competing objectives and different people with different agendas. And so we need an economy after all, right? Even with superintelligence. So how do you organize that economy? It cannot be like the current economy where people are doing jobs that they don't like, in order to get money to survive, because we won't need that. It has to be something completely different, completely new, and ideally better aligned. And so the alignment economy says any transaction has a price, and that price is inverse to how much it affects freedom. So things that propagate freedom should generate money. Things that cost freedom should cost money in proportion. And these alignment prices are impossible to compute perfectly, but you can build AI models, the superintelligence model, to reason about them and approximate them good enough way, better than the existing economy, that we can actually use them as basis for transaction. So the alignment economy is a superintelligence run economy where it maximizes our freedom and enables us to negotiate our differences by assigning prices to transactions. And these prices naturally are how much our differences minimize or maximize collective agency. I think it's a very clean system, and you can derive it from scratch. It seems to me, the more I think about it deeply, that the current economy, the capitalist economy, is a bad approximation of the alignment economy. And you can consider actually other models like socialism or China-based mix of socialism and capitalism as also other approximations for this ideal alignment economy. And I feel like with superintelligence, we can actually finally get to a better economic system. I think we're going to have to do that if we want to maximize our flourishing. But it's a choice that we have to take together as a society. And so all I have to do is explain it and try to do my best to help the world see what I see. And if that's what the world chooses, then, this is the future we will have.
And if it doesn't?
It's okay, because the world is free in a very deep sense, and you cannot do good by trying to overpower its fundamental freedom. If you choose to limit yourself, that is your choice. And there's even like a whole history of rich philosophy about that, where reality veils itself to itself in order to explore itself more deeply.
Yeah, we touched about that last time too. But let me ask you this, because time is advancing, so we only have about 30 minutes left. Most alignment reasoning, or the way it's kind of represented nowadays in the popular media, is about aligning humanity with AI. And last time we touched about the fact that we need to align ourselves with each other first, possibly, most likely, at least in my opinion, before we have any hope of aligning AI together, or at the very least, we have to all align at the same time for this to kind of create that kind of alignment economy. So not just humanity and AI, but also humanity and other humans, and so on. Maybe AI with AI, and so on. So what does this look like in practice? How do we do that? How does what you're describing work? The alignment economy for humans. And let's talk about a few kinds of humans: Russians and Ukrainians, Jews and Palestinians, you name it. There's many examples. So how do we align these humans who are fundamentally human and yet seem to be at each other's throats, impossible to reach any kind of peace or lasting alignment?
Yes. So I agree that we have to jointly align them, AI. And you're giving me an impossibly difficult questions because I have to answer every single detail in the world, and it's not up to me, right? But in order to kind of get around your impossible problem, um, they used to call you Socrates, right? They still call you
Yes.
Socrates. So I
Yes.
think I'll inspire from the great philosopher Socrates. Um, I think he viewed these alignment problems as a sign of veiling or ignorance. And if anything, I don't expect that there's a sudden shock where we all suddenly realize we're one and everyone hugs each other. And, that's not going to happen. That's probably not even desirable. Rather, it's going to be a process where we can unveil step by step. So anything you can do to unveil this ignorance that we have. And it could be a continuous process. It could be that the economy becomes more and more and more efficient, that things feel like they're getting closer to the alignment economy. Could be that there are some political movements. So there's going to be, I hope, a gradual process where things get unveiled over time, and then we can, after a while, on the other side, look back and say, wow, that's been a fundamental transformation that looks revolutionary, but going through it feels evolutionary. That's the ideal thing.
Wow. Yeah, I think Hans Moravec said that if you're riding the wave, the singularity doesn't feel like a singularity because you're riding the wave. So I understand what you're saying. Time is advancing here, so I have a billion questions on this, but I want to zoom back out because you kind of came up with this and see if we can kind of look at the bigger picture and talk about your plan and what you're planning to do from here on and stuff. So, okay, so we talked about your breakthroughs, architecture, learning, and alignment. Is there anything else that we're missing that we're announcing?
Yes. So how it all fits together, that's a very exciting thing. So we're building super intelligence, right? And it's not a digital super intelligence, it's an embodied super intelligence. So it's a super intelligence that has, an infinite variety of bodies that can take action in the physical world. So we still need one more ingredient, which is a vision for how that's going to fit in together in the current embodied economy that we live in, right? And this is a concept which I call the supernet. So the supernet is the super intelligence network. You can also call the super factory network. It's a convergence of concepts that gives you a clear vision for how this is going to be implemented in the world. And I think that's very exciting because it goes beyond just technical or philosophical to actually grounded day-to-day business operations. So the supernet, so you can think that we had before the internet, we had a type of network, which is the electricity net, right? So we all have access to electricity. What it brings to us is energy. So electricity is the movement of energy, the electric net. And then we created something called the internet, which is really about digital reality. It's moving digital reality back and forth. It's moving text, images, videos, voice. It's about moving digital reality. The supernet is about moving physical reality. So it's about actually actualizing outcome, moving actuality, right? So moving from intention to manifestation in a network that can serve anyone. So the way we envision the supernet is it's a network of nodes. Each node could be a factory, a company, a service provider, a household that is all coordinated by superintelligence to coordinate together and realize any human request. So say you want to build a house, you know, a very nice house underwater for some reason, right? You're going to need to have a super intelligence design the house for you, propose different designs, talk with you until you finalize which is your ideal dream house underwater. And then it's going to need to see what equipments are available to realize the house. What are the parts? Maybe it needs to mine special material. Maybe it needs to just buy those special material if they're available on the node. And then it needs robots to actually build the house. Some of these robots might exist, but there's no good robot right now to do underwater construction. So it needs to design it from scratch. And it needs to use other robots to build that new robot. And the other robots are what? They're nodes on the supernet. So the supernet is a self-creating network of embodied intelligence. You can use the supernet to build more supernet because robots can build other robots. AI can design AI. AI can design robots. Robots can build the chips. Chips can train the AI. So it's all a loop. And the beautiful part here is that it's a participatory economy. In the sense, anyone can participate to set up a node in the supernet, just like anyone can host their website, write a blog, do a podcast. Anyone can participate in the supernet. And so we need a protocol for that. So we will be announcing plans for that. We will, of course, this is more of a long-term vision, but we intend to basically develop and open source the infrastructure tools to allow the creation of the supernet, which is the evolution of the electric net, the internet, to physical form.
Wow. Okay, is there anything else?
I mean, I can talk more, but I think we'll leave it for future. There's a lot more spicy stuff, but we'll leave this for future meetings together. Hopefully, we'll talk again. Because I want to talk to you when ideas are mature enough that I can, when they're beyond the conceptual stage, where actually I have thought about them deeply enough, and I don't, I respect your time and respect the audience time.
Fantastic. Okay, so then let's pull back a little and let's talk about your plan. So we're announcing, the architecture, the learning model, the fact that it's accomplishing or ready for alignment. So it's an AGI capable model, and where you've mentioned the supernet. But what happens the next day after you announce these things? What's your plan? So are you doing an IPO? Because you just talked about, capitalism and all that stuff, but yet I know that you have angel and venture investors and stuff like that. So let's say you've made the announcement. Here you are. What's your next action? What's your plan in the short, medium, and long term?
Okay. So we need to build the supernet. And the supernet includes the alignment economy fundamentally in it, right? Because it's composed of aligned AGI agents in a distributed way that represents everyone. To build the supernet, we need to work within the existing economic infrastructure. So I believe in revolution by evolution, which means that we're not going to shut down the economy and start from scratch. We're going to have to evolve there, which is great because it means we can use the tools of the existing economy, like fundraising, like recruiting, like the energy infrastructure and so on. So the first step is we're going to scale up the training of our models to make them more and more useful so that they can do more on the job from day one.
So what does that mean? Do you need more capital? Do you need more
Yes.
compute? Do you need more energy? All of the above?
So all of the above, but not too much. The reason not too much is that these models learn on the job, so they don't have to be perfect, but they have to be good enough that once they start working, they're at the level of someone you hiring as opposed to an expert. Because they learn on the job, we can get away with minimal energy, compute, and capital requirements. We plan to sometime next year, probably around middle of next year, we plan to open it for any developer or company to actually use this technology to build their business on. And slowly over time, these models will get better and better and be able to handle not only factory tasks, but also household tasks, but also construction tasks, also inventing new science, new technology, new materials, new drugs, hopefully, medical interventions, and so on. And over a period of a few years, what we hope is to instigate and catalyze the supernet. We don't want to own the supernet. Nobody can own the supernet by definition, but it's something that we hope to play a catalytic role in its creation.
What about the AGI capable model?
Yes, so that is the engine. That is the thing that is powering the supernet. So supernet is a network of AGI agents that are communicating and negotiating together on the behalf of every supernet node. So every business, every individual part of the supernet will have an agent on its behalf representing it.
Just like we get access to electricity today, we're going to get access to this.
Embodied superintelligence, exactly. That's the back end side. The front end side, this is going to take us a complete different tangent, but there's going to be a super end browser. So the super end browser, we call it Stream. So this is the way the supernet renders itself to you. So it has to be completely personalized to every individual. Compassion approach, right? Maximizing your free choice. So instead of it being recommendation engines that's maximizing your engagement, instead it should be maximizing your agency and freedom. And so that supernet has a front-end browser that is generated on the fly. Every pixel is generated on the fly. Every modality is generated on the fly. That is a browser that I think will be very much how we interface with the supernet as individuals. And the alignment economy might start being just a regular economy, but as time goes on, people will choose to value, whether individuals will choose to value economic externalities more, or eventually groups of individuals or even countries, then you can imagine a gradual transition to the alignment economy through the supernet. Yeah, there's a lot more, like I said, but I really want to be mindful to share things when they're ready to share.
Sure, yeah. And then, okay, so, but I'm just trying to understand how do you fit within the current system? Because the system that we operate with is so powerful that it creates the context which literally ends up giving meaning to the content we create. Even if we have totally unique and original content as your AGI capable model is supposed to be, the structure within which you place it may actually change its very nature. That's my concern here. And that's why I'm trying to figure out what's the structure you're planning here. So when you said all of the above, but not too much on energy, capital, and compute, can you tell me what not too much means? And does this mean you're going to be doing an IPO? Would you be taking your company public?
We're too early in the company history to do public. Our earliest plan to go public would be in about 3 years. That's the earliest reasonable plan.
So
But
you do
we,
another round of capital, uh, sort of like more venture capital?
yes, so given our capital requirements are not very high on the pre-training part, and our customers, because it's learning on the job, they basically, in a sense, pay for the scaling because the scaling is benefiting them. So it's actually a pretty good business model compared to traditional LLMs because LLMs have to do everything in advance. They have to put everything in the training phase because it doesn't
Are you
learn on the
saying
job.
you'll be able to bootstrap this on its own?
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's fundamentally different than currently. All of those you have had to pour tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions into them, and still there is no full on return on those, and there may not be for a while, especially with the current level of capital investment.
Yes, because they don't do continual learning. So there's no way to bootstrap. You have to do everything in scratch. So continual learning is fundamental to getting the costs down. So you can get that process of, every usage is improving the model.
So you're either partially or fully planning to bootstrap this, meaning self-fund it rather than go to more venture capitalists.
We will get a minimal amount of venture capital investment, and we are actually talking about this and closing the round soon. But that's like a joke, right? Like the amount that we're raising is very little. It's primarily bootstrap. We do need to push it a little bit, right? So you don't have random waves to start, but
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
I
We
understand. I
plan a
understand. Yeah.
bootstrapping approach.
Yeah. Just like when you, let me give you a silly example, but when you're making sourdough bread, you need to have some sourdough bread starter to start the process of turning the normal dough into sourdough, right? So you need some capital to be able to start the process so that you can bootstrap all of this self-financing. I get it. I get it. I'm
Great.
just hopeful and concerned that it doesn't hijack the agenda at some point, because it depends on the the capitalists, the people who give you the money and their agendas, and how much power they have to convert your agenda to, or align your agenda to their agenda, which is to make a return on their investment, obviously, and stuff like that. And would that impact on the short, medium, or long-term goals? Okay, so I think this is a good moment for us to bring our conversation to an end. So let me ask you this question, as by way of closing, perhaps. We discussed last time that your goal is not like other people. So your goal is to to give humanity a magic wand. So the stress here being not like other people and companies in the AI ongoing race towards AGI. Your goal is not to just create a magic wand, but your goal is to actually give give the magic wand to humanity. So it looks like, presuming, and that's a big presumption, but presuming that all of this that you've shared with us today pans out. So we have this AGI capable model. It really is able to accomplish what you're hoping to accomplish. It really is able to start that supernet. It really is able to bootstrap and turn the normal current capitalist economy into the alignment economy in time, reasonable time frame. So not as a revolution, but one step at a time, which would hopefully accelerate, and in a few years would get it there. So this, let's say, is kind of like creating the wand, right? You have the model, you have the supernet, the economy, the alignment economy, the elements are there. What about the giving part? Is the giving part when do we reach? So if on Monday we celebrate the benchmark towards the creation of the wand, what about the benchmark of the giving of the wand? How do we measure and estimate whereabouts are we there? Because as you said last time, it's not really about the creation of the want, it's about the giving it, whereas everyone else is focused and preoccupied on the creation. I don't know, does this question actually make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. That's a fantastic question. I love that question. One of the things that I believe when you find a good mission for your company, this mission is never complete, right? So Google's mission is organize the world's information and making universally accessible and useful. That's an infinite mission. It never ends, right? And in a sense, that giving is never going to end, right? Because there's always more to do, and that's wonderful. That's how you know you have a good mission. It's inspiring. You can take action on it in the short term, but also it takes you very, very far. But how would we know we're making progress? What are some of the metrics, right? So the things that I care about is to see more agency in the world. So people are empowered to follow their dream, do what they think their ideal life should be an artist, be an explorer. And you can measure that through the diversity of choices being made. And also technically just the number of degrees of freedom available to humanity. And it might even be a bit more concrete, like, do we have disease? Can you choose to live for 1,000 years if you want to? How much do we understand the world? Have we chosen to go beyond the Earth and maybe be galactic AGI civilization, or maybe not? How much are we aligned with ourselves? How much do we know ourselves more deeply? So all of these are not very hard metrics in the sense that they're not as easy to measure. But just like we defined freedom and we said that we can make the models align to freedom better by comparing various plans, we can also compare various states of the world. And it's always easier to compare than to generate. So we can say, well, it seems like to our best capability, we have these better outcomes. So we have more agency in the world. This is how I know.
Wow.
I know when I feel like you can author your future, you can author your life, however you like it.
Yeah, that's a very noble and a good way of measuring it, because unfortunately, much of humanity, or too much for my liking anyway, is trapped into survival to be able to actually make a free choice about, and don't have the agency to go or even look beyond that survival trap. And I'm talking not just like in the third world, but even here in Canada and stuff like that. People are so busy and working and just like caught up in the rat race and all of this. And living the artistic life, as you put it, would be a noble kind of a measure in some ways, though there's also a number of questions coming to that, which we can't go into today. Dr. Jad Tarifi, how do we close our conversation today? You made a bunch of very monumental, potentially, announcements. I didn't expect that, to be honest. I was more prepared for you telling me a story about how something didn't happen that you were expecting to happen, because I've had this story before. So now we're making these announcements. You're making these announcements. How do you want to send us away? And by the way, I hope it's not like Albert Einstein, who published his, theory of relativity, and then for a bunch of years, nothing happened, really. And it took, I don't know, 10 years or something for someone to do a test with the solar eclipse and all of this in two parts of the Earth. I think one was in Australia and maybe one was in South America, and they were able to confirm with a prediction Einstein's theory of relativity, and then it became the big deal. But it was a very, very long time from the day he published it until the day that came, almost a decade, I think, and so nothing. So I hope we're kind of, if what you say is true, I hope it pans out much faster than in his case. So how do you want to send us away today?
Well, I feel it would be nice to keep it open-ended, and we send it by leaving room for more. So I would be happy to do another podcast with you in the near future and continue digging deeper. Maybe then you tell me, wow, the announcement worked well, or you might say, what do we need to do to accelerate things? And maybe I'll be able to reveal some additional exciting stuff that we've been working on and I've been working on.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's leave it open-ended, but give us some more specifics on the announcement. Is it going to be, because I'm going to publish this hopefully right before or during, maybe. So I don't know if specifics will be useful. Where can people go in and find more information after the announcement is a fact? Who are hungry for more information from the source rather than third party like a podcaster who is a non-expert like me?
Yeah, so we will have an announcement page on integral.ai, and there will be a contact form for people who might be interested to try out our sandbox. So we built an AGI sandbox.
Wow.
That lets you kind of play with the AGI, the baby version, and see it learn. Yeah, by the way, that was a lot more work than I thought it would be. The sandbox itself was, a lot of technical issues that have nothing to do with AI, just
sandboxing. Okay, I'm going to tell my friend Professor Roman Yampolsky, because he's the expert on security stuff. Let's see what he thinks and says about it. Okay. Well, Dr. Jad Tarifi, this was another absolutely fascinating, potentially epic interview with you again. Let's hope in retrospective, someday someone would say this was epic. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today and for having the generosity to share this with us. Thank you.
Thank you.